It was morning. Again in America. Millions of men and women were going to work. And high up above the streets, in his Olympic Tower, one of America's most celebrated self-made men,
the most successful single individual in the history of American fashion. Ladies and gentlemen, Halston
was nowhere in sight.
The question that all of New York was asking last night was, whatever happened to Halston?
It's a story of high fashion and high finance as one of America's big names in fashion.
It was business as usual, you could say. They bought his name, sold off his life's work for pennies on the dollar. And when that wasn't enough, well, they forced him out of his own office. Some will say he had it coming. But what he didn't see coming were the tapes. All 215 of them. Erased, as per the corporation's order.
Liza Minnelli, Indiana.
Sportswear, knits, broadcloth, menswear. And this is Andy Warhol's portrait of me, which was
You
very
see,
well up here. I think
pictures meant everything to Halston.
And texture demands texture.
Life is like a picture, he used to say.
Who's that lucky guy?
Well, he got his perfect picture. Only the price turned out to be a little high.
How empty they can be. But when I hold you in my arms, that's a heaven to me. Who cares for fame and fortune? They're only passing things. But the touch of your lips on mine makes me feel like a king. Your kind of love is a treasure I hold. It's so much greater than silver or gold.
It all started in September of 1983, when Carl Epstein joined Halston Enterprises. He was Halston's new corporate manager, and he would be his last. Carl wanted to learn everything about Halston, so I brought him the tapes. Who am I? Just someone working in the archives. Nobody important for our story, really. Our story is Halston. Behind the images flickering on the screen, who was Halston?
I'd like to go back in time a little bit to just how you started. I know that you started with hats and worked your way.
Oh,
We're going to move this? Please let me know these things. Are we rolling?
Am I? Okay. I don't mind it being a little disheveled. Oh, okay. Thanks. Halston was the custom milliner at Bergdorf. And we lived around the corner from each other. So he and I would walk to work every day. We'd be talking, gossiping, having fun. He was so much fun. And then the minute we would arrive to the building and you'd have to go through the revolving door, suddenly Halston had arrived at Bergdorf. And the first time it quite shocked me, and then, of course, I understood. He now has put on his Halston mask. And the voice would change, and good morning, ladies. He was dealing with the creme de la creme of women in the world.
Were you the person who put the pillbox on Jackie Kennedy?
Yes, I was.
That hat was genius. If you look at the inauguration, most of those ladies wore a mink coat. Jackie was in a cloth coat and a cloth hat.
I'll never forget the impact that hat had. It was even out in Montana where I was sitting at the time.
It was a very funny story because it was a rather windy day, and she put her hand on the hat, and it ended up to have a dent in it. And so during all the ceremonies, it had a dent in the hat, and everybody who copied it put a dent in it, which was so funny. I was quite a young man, but I became very, very famous quickly on that. It was the first time in the history of Bergdorf that they promoted a designer personality. And I headed a department of 150 milliners and 12 sales ladies.
Bergdorf was a very rarefied world, but he was born in Des Moines, Iowa. As I read, because he never told me any of this, Halston was so busy moving forward. I knew very little about Halston's personal life. Certainly, I didn't know much about his background. In November of 1966, there was Truman Capote's black and white ball.
Everybody wanted to be at that ball because it was it, you know, as far as where you should go, you know.
You would measure your social importance by the invitation, getting one or not getting one.
Do you know if he was invited to the ball?
I would have thought so, but now I have my doubts. I don't know. Was he?
Halston did not have an invite to the ball.
Are you rolling, Herbie? We have filmed this black and white ball in color for your enlightenment. Good heavens, here comes John Kenneth Galbraith. The Maharani of Baroda is here, and the Baroness de Rothschild and Mrs. Lowell Guinness. We only tell you this because we know that you were not rich, social, or beautiful enough to be invited here tonight.
The irony is, Halston had made more than 100 masks that night. Kay Graham, who owned the Washington Post. Candace Bergen. And of course, Dee Dee Ryan. Dee Dee Ryan was certainly one of the chicest women going.
That's me, dancing with Truman in the mask that Halston made for me.
Dee Dee Ryan, former editor and fashion legend. She had fallen on hard times since the 60s, so Halston gave her a job.
I've known H from the beginning, from before the beginning, really. Back then, he was still a milliner. Milliners didn't go through the front door. Different world then.
I must have said, "Are you going?" And he said, "Oh, yes." That's all I can say. He didn't tell me everything. He wasn't invited by Truman, but he got himself there.
Was this Halston? Or this one? Was he even at the ball? He was on everybody's face that night, and yet he was invisible.
He called me one day and said, "There's something that I need to tell you." I was in Southampton. I was invited to a very grand dinner. Our hostess is a client, and she likes me, and she invited me. And we sat down, and two of the husbands never sat down. They stood behind their chairs. Everybody was seated, and the hostess looked up, and they said, if these two faggots are at table, we will not be joining you for your dinner. He said, Tom, I just need you to understand that you and I could not hope to be anything more than trained faggot poodles to jump through the hoops of these rich people.
The mental image most people have of a male homosexual looks pretty much like this: a man with effeminate characteristics. The film you are now watching is purposely being projected in its negative form to prevent identification of the people it shows. The location is a public bathing beach at 21st Street on Miami Beach. The scenes were photographed with telescopic lenses from a hidden vantage point. Despite the negative image, the actions themselves are easily recognized.
I met Halston at Fire Island. He was just, just a fabulous human being. And we became fast friends.
This precious time just can't be wasted.
The freedom of our sexuality there, life before AIDS. Halston and I partied a great deal together. We would go dancing in Harlem. It was always very, very, very eclectic. But the 60s in general were a political, moral, social revolution.
Halston understood that there was a whole new social order coming in. The war baby boom came of age. Drugs, sex, and rock and roll. Even the French couture changed. Saint Laurent, Givenchy, and Cardin opened up ready-to-wear boutiques. And so Halston saw all of that in Paris, and there was tension with the Bergdorf people.
Boy, Halston Frowing. He was a strange character, quite fussy, and he was always very demanding, every little detail, all sorts of small, petty things, too.
Halston came to see me, and he said, I have backing. Would you clean up your act? I was deep into drugs by that time, but I did stop intravenous drugs and went to work with him.
This is a house that Jack built, y'all. Remember this house. This was the land that he worked by hand.
Well, the salon was on 68th Street in Madison, in this little tiny walk-up kind of derelict building. Compared to Bergdorf Goodman, I thought, wow, this is didn't feel so fancy. Then you went upstairs, a plain door, and you'd knock, and then you'd go in. It was just magic. Basically, it was just a floor-through apartment that they turned into this incredible background, which is all just sort of magical and exotic, and you felt like you were in Indian palace, or you didn't know where you were. You were on safari. It was very wild. And then I remember the furniture, because it was very uncomfortable. It was horn furniture. Like, you sat in them, and you just didn't want to sit in them. It wasn't, but it looked great.
Halston made the atmosphere very democratic. I mean, I'm a poor kid from Long Island City, but then there was Marisa Berenson and Barry, who grew up in Paris.
It was a mix of social circles, and that's what was so great about that era, is that it was a big mix of interesting, fascinating people. Like Elsa.
I love to be with homosexuals. I stayed 15 years with homosexuals, and I love them because I didn't have a lover.
Pat Cleveland was discovered on a subway car.
I was still in high school. I went into the room, and he looked at me, and he said, okay, you'll be here tomorrow for the show.
He was totally laser focused on this collection because in his mind, I'm sure this was make or break.
All the ladies of society were there. The Vogue ladies were sitting in the front row. Oh my goodness, this is it. We're doing this show. And he lined us girls up. We were all perfectly dressed. And he would go to the first girl and he'd whisper something into the ear. And he'd say, "Now don't forget, you're the best."
His clothes hit me like this is it, and this is the fashion that I would want to wear. No zippers, just get in and out over your head.
Overnight success. It was a clean look. The simplicity was really needed after the 60s, and it was all American, from an all-American boy.
Let's meet our first challenger. So, will you enter and sign in, please? Mr. X. Panel, this is Mr. X, and may I tell you that Mr. X is concerned with a product. And now let's show our audience just who our guest is and what his product is.
Can I rule out that your name is Valentino?
You can rule that out.
All right. No, I'm sure if I hear the name, I'll know. It's because I don't recognize you on sight. But would the clothing be the new sensation hot pants?
That's it.
Is that right?
Felt like the beginning because he was so enthusiastic and everybody was so charmed with him. He was so young and it was enticing. You just wanted to be in the room with him.
I was 18. I was so innocent. I knew nothing. I was from the Midwest. Everyone was unusual for me, like Pat asked. She was an Andy Warhol superstar with frizzy hair.
I'm just wild about Andy, and Andy's wild about me. The heavenly blisses of his kisses, they fill me with ecstasy.
This was definitely the in crowd. Andy kept saying, oh, this is so in, Bob. This is so in. He knew Halston from the 1950s when Andy was doing ads and windows for Bergdorf's. He was comfortable in the world of fashion.
Wild about me.
Hello?
Joe Euler, please.
It's me, Joe Euler, here on the phone.
Hi, Joe Euler.
You got me in a good day. You better put it all on tape.
Joe was not only the illustrator, but a close friend. You know, Halston was very cool, and Joe was very hot.
We were a team. His desk and my desk were the same desk.
He was drawn to people who just displayed their emotions and also had this tremendous aesthetic side.
A woman like Elsa Perret was really extraordinary. And he believed so much in me, Halston.
Elsa would be there like drawing things all the time. And Halston said, you need to be a jewelry designer. And somehow she made this jewelry for us, which is, I had 2 of these. One was stolen.
Why did you do jewelry? It just was trapped into it. I did something for fun. It became a success.
Really?
We were hipsters. We thought we were. We probably weren't at all, but, you know. My husband, Bill, was starting to work at Halston's. They got along really well together. In the beginning, he couldn't wait to go to work. And that's a great feeling, isn't it?
Bill Dugan was the first disciple. And 12 years later, he was still spreading the gospel.
If you want to understand Halston's clothes, you have to understand the lineage first. You see, when he did his first line, I think he was the first to be surprised at how good he really was. The other, who was surprised, of course, was his mentor.
Who inspired you? Who were your major influences in the beginning?
Oh, I think perhaps Charles James, who was a friend of mine.
Charles James is such an amazing figure. Difficult, controversial, but he's one of these people who was so amazingly talented.
I know what it is to be young.
Even the Europeans understood that Charles James was a singular genius.
You don't know what it is to be old.
Halston had this incredible fascination and, I would say, envy of Charles James.
You'll be saying the same thing.
He mimicked Charles. Charles would say things like, "You're only as good as who you dress." And suddenly Halston was saying, "You're only as good as who you dress."
I've asked so many questions.
In the late 60s, Charles James was really out on his luck, and he owed money, and he really wasn't designing.
Find all the answers.
It's true that you're considering going on welfare, isn't it?
Yes, it is, in order to get my doctor's bill paid.
It's just the most shocking.
Halston felt for him.
There'll be days to remember.
So he hired Charles James to help him with a collection.
Halston saved his life, gave him a shot to do a collection up there. And it was opening day. Elsa, H, myself, the three of us went up there, and there's no collection. And this fool's up there creating space around the figure, but we ain't got no collection.
James's working methodology was overworking and overworking the same idea and creating things that were so incredibly complicated that it simply wasn't viable.
H just had to ignore him. The collection wasn't ready.
Charles was furious throughout the whole thing because it wasn't right. Charles wanted control. Halston wanted control. It was almost like father and rebellious son. And it was a disaster, by the way. The collection was a disaster.
The few pieces that I've seen look a little tortured, frankly. Very typical of James's work, where he would take fabric and twist it and torque it, and in the end result, you had things that looked amazing in a way, but somehow unwearable.
Halston said, "Well, I just want you to know that I'm locking Charles out of the workroom."
Halston is a middle-of-the-road man who would be better as a buyer in a store or a stylist. He knows how to select good things to copy, but his passion has been to put his name on it, for which action the word plagiarism is correct.
Halston didn't copy. Eventually, I went to work for Halston, and I saw that Halston took concepts of Charles James and relaxed them. His clothes were for a modern time, for a time where women's lifestyle had changed completely. I mean, he understood that.
Elegance and ease. A sense of owning power without being masculine and honoring the body that you have. Basically, you were usually naked underneath.
You were free inside your clothes.
He took away the cage, and he made things as though you didn't really need the structure as much as you needed the woman. He really based most of his collection on most of us girls.
I think maybe we just had a pin there to hold it up. It might be good, huh? Mm-hmm. Let's see you turn it, Chrissy, huh? Here's a nice
Fabric to Halston was like clay to a sculptor. He knew how to use it, and everything was cut on the bias, so it spiraled.
Basically, bias is cutting fabric on an oblique or 45-degree angle. Fabric is usually cut on the straight grain. If you've ever cut something on the bias, it flows over the body. It opens up, if you will.
It's very hard to do it. Nothing is straight. It's very hard to sew. Everything moves, especially chiffon. It's very hard to control. But I made it so easy.
He just would throw a piece of fabric on the floor and cut through it pick it up, throw it on you, and then was a dress.
That's genius. It's a dress, just from the way he cut it. I don't know anybody who could do that. He's the only one.
There is no doubt those hands are gold. He's one of the great designers of all time. Absolutely on a par with Balenciaga and Saint Laurent. And I know my fashion, and boy, that's one thing I don't give a shit I will fight anybody on.
That's probably the largest Halston collection of all the museums in the States. When I started working here, I started really looking at the clothes, and I'm most fascinated with the single seam patterns. Similar to the one that's up there, which looks like a painting, is actually the pattern for that dress. It's really hard to see it flat, but then it just spirals. And this is another one that is cut from one piece of fabric, folded, you cut out the neck, and the seam goes from here to here, down the side, and then across. It's one piece of fabric. The pattern looks like a Cuisinart blade. Very much like the art at the time, like abstract art. It was reducing it down to its least common denominators.
I think if you know, fashion history would write it, I'd like to have the credit point of saying maybe we cleaned it up a bit, where, you know, I have a theory that less becomes more so much.
I felt more intimidated by Halston, by whatever man I met in my life. Because everything he was doing was great. Every time, he astonished me.
How do you feel when you, say, walk into a restaurant in New York and a lady comes in looking smashing in a Halston outfit?
I'm very proud. I'm just very proud if somebody looks good in it. You know?
What if she comes in and doesn't look good in it?
Then I'm not so proud.
The Halston Market is in the better stores across the country. In New York, it's Bergdorf Goodman, where he has a boutique in the same spot he started selling hats to rich ladies 15 years ago. This is Halston Off the Rack. The favorite item? An ultra suede shirt dress with a $200 price tag that has broken all previous sales records. You're late. My God, are you ever on time? Come on. But for real extravagance, the ladies come to Halston's own showroom on Madison Avenue, where super saleswoman Pat Ast will give them that special treatment. What about Pat Ast? Some people have suggested that by using her, you're putting down fashion a bit.
Well, if you think that Patty is a put-down, but I don't think so. I take her very seriously. And I like to make her glamorous.
Halston designs things that are made especially for me, which is the most incredible thing, because looking at me, you know I'm not the normal-sized woman.
I think he appreciated the woman's body. I think he appreciated all the different types of women. He loved all of the diversity of his models.
Simply take this down, Iman,
Yeah.
and you turn around that way so you see a décolleté. This is Iman's first show. She's never been in a fashion show before. Now, how do you feel about your first fashion show, Iman?
Very nervous.
He always loved different personalities, and he encouraged that.
Do you think that models are some of the sexy, most beautiful girls in the world?
Sometimes.
Do you think they should all be in the movies?
No.
He also loved the idea of being controversial. I remember the Cody Award show, he decided it was going to be a happening, so anything goes.
I'm gonna tell you, I hope that show goes better than the rehearsal.
All the fashion world is waiting for the Cody Awards.
The audience in the Cody Awards tend to be a little more formal, but Halston wanted to be very reverent.
Andy and Halston came up with this idea that it was like a talent show. Halston's Talent Hour. I played the clarinet. He said, "What can you do?" What else can you do?
The audience, they didn't know what to make of it. Halston wanted to be, just throw everything in, including the kitchen sink. And by the way, have Pat come out of the birthday cake.
He took a chance, a leap of faith to be something that maybe a lot of people think they can't do. He would say, you can have anything you want. You're a good person. You know, that feeling that somebody believes in you, you know? And because of that, you know, he made me stronger. Waterproof. I remember one time we went out west to do a show, and Halston said, I want you to come with me, I want to see something. He rented a car, and you never saw him drive, because we'd always be in limos. And we went way out in the middle of nowhere, out there, not a lot to look at. Sky and earth. And he said, that's where I grew up. This is where I grew up. It would be in the middle of nowhere. It's just like farms with the big rolls of hay. He said, I just wanted to come by here.
I only lived in Iowa for about 5 minutes. You know, I mean, I moved out of Iowa as a young man. It was during the Second World War, and my father was in a business that took us from one place to another. So I lived in the Lake of the Ozarks, and I lived in Kentucky, and I lived in Missouri, and then we finally settled in Indiana. So I was all over, you know. It was a sort of an unsettled time.
When you do go back home...
There is no home in Iowa, you see. What else do you think we should go over?
Just a little bit of the history. I think that would be good for us to have.
Oh,
so
let's not go into all the history crap, you know. Talk about right now.
But this is history.
The past just doesn't interest me so much. I think you have pretty much. I think you have enough.
And we need a transcript as soon as possible. Okay.
His mother would come and visit, and she always called him Halston. And he had changed the pronunciation to Halston, but she would correct you. His name is Halston. It's a family name. She also used to say, Halston had disappeared, but Halston was a force to be reckoned with. And this is the manager of the boutique. Ed was just as handsome as Halston and had just as much charisma.
Ed Austin.
Never mentioned his dad, but he called his mom every week, every Monday afternoon. Hallie Mae. I'm being careful about what I'm saying. I don't know how much you know about me.
I didn't know it at the time, but apparently Halston and Ed had a relationship earlier.
I was kept hidden. I still don't know why. I would go to his house at night. The doorman would stop me and say the deliveries go in the back. That sort of thing. We had a wonderful relationship. He used to call me the Crown Prince. And he was the king.
When did it end?
One Christmas, Ed had done this absolutely beautiful window. And that was the day that Victor Hugo took over.
So listen, I won't tell you who Victor was. Halston dialed the dick one night. And overnight we were involved with this thing called Victor Hugo.
Victor came down and started to rearrange Ed's window. It was very asymmetrical and very haphazard. But Halston came and loved the window. When Ed saw it, he just put on his coat and went home. It was the changing of the card.
Are you looking for his rosebud? The one thing that explains his whole life.
You won't find one. Not with Halston. What you see is what you get, baby.
Victor was Venezuelan, and he was a bad boy who got into a lot of trouble.
My theory has always been that Halston came from an alcoholic family, that his father had a problem, and that Halston recreated his family life with Victor as the dysfunctional person who is constantly going to keep everything off balance.
So much trash, second-hand information, gossip. Was he in a closet than anybody else? He's a person I lived with him for 50 years, and that's like a family. He's a creator of magic. It was a beautiful dream like I've never seen before. I was an artist at large, and with them became my paintings.
He'd do the pregnancy, Patty Hearst. I mean, really crazy. But this was his personality, extreme.
Why did Halston put up with Victor?
Because he was in love with him.
When did it fall apart?
The day they met.
Roy, I found these pictures of us in my mom's attic. Darling H, you love life and I love you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Liza Minnelli.
When I met Halston, I just remember him talking to me, listening. He'd say, I got it, all right, and just put it on you, and it danced with you. That's it. His clothes danced with you. We were joined at the hip from then on. He was like my dad in a way because when I was a little girl, my father would give me 5 costumes every year. And it was a dress from an American in Paris. And perfectly made, exactly like for the ladies. And I guess I got into appreciating how clothes could change the way you felt.
She dressed only in Halston, ever. I mean, she still does.
Yes.
Liza Minnelli.
Say yes. Life keeps happening every day.
And this is Halston, who is, I think today, wouldn't you say the best-known name? No, you shouldn't say best in whiskers, and other designers get upset. You're pretty good, Halston.
Thank you.
You'll never win if you never play.
I would always think, how do I go to that next level?
There's mink and marigold right outside, and long white.
He was looking for a perfume company.
Nothing's gained if there's nothing tried. Say yes.
Every single week, he was having meetings with Revlon Sullivan, Cody.
Mr. Bannon of IFF, he'd like to meet with you today, if possible.
And then finally, Max Factor. And Max Factor was a subsidiary of Norton Simon.
Say yes, yes I can.
I remember
remember Halston saying to Andy and me, you know, I really like the Norton Simon people because they're all so tall. David Mahoney was the chairman of Norton Simon, and he was tall, good-looking, and, you know, a lot of glamour.
There's lots of chaff. There's lots of weeds.
We wanted a top perfume line. He was the hottest thing around. I was willing to buy the whole thing, just to have him aboard for his general knowledge of panache.
It seemed like a good match. If he was bought in total under Norton Simon, he'd have the freedom to explore and to develop more of what Halston wanted.
Explain this to me. When you bought Halston, you bought the rights to his name, you bought his design advice, you bought everything. For how long?
Forever.
Yes.
At the time, it seemed like a huge coup. And all his friends, I mean, including Andy and all of us, were very happy for him.
He told me, Gino, we're going to be very busy because I'm going to design furniture, car interior. I'm going to design a carpet.
Well, don't you find that if you take on that many things that one of your projects is going to suffer?
It's rather like growing a tree. You know, everyone thinks you're an overnight success. I've worked very hard for 20 years. And, you know, it's just a further extension of it. It's another branch. And they all help each other in a curious way.
Was this the beginning of the end? Or was it just the beginning?
In 1973, 5 American designers and 5 French designers were showing their collections at one time, at one place, the Palace of Versailles.
American designers had never been invited to show in Paris. And this was a huge, huge deal.
For Halston, it was very important. He'd go as far as he had to go to get it to be the best he thought he could make it.
He realized that you need a star in there. What happened was that Halston got David Mahoney to sponsor the trip, and David loved it. He fit right in there.
David Mahoney seemed to me to be fairly ambitious socially, and like so many self-made people, they wanted to be part of this kind of cafe society.
It was a very competitive evening.
I think the designers were having difficulty with each other. The French took up all the time for the rehearsal, and we were the addendums. It was rude, actually.
Their whole presentation was beyond grand. They changed orchestras for each of the different designer segments.
We couldn't rehearse. All of us were waiting and waiting. It was cold, damp. Unfortunately, with Halston, it got to him.
A terrible fight seems to break out. I heard some very vicious things were said.
He did have a blow-up, very dramatic.
It was very difficult. Halston left and Liza said, you know, we've got to get this show done.
She's the one who sat down with Halston. She unified everybody.
We'd open and I'd sing, Bonjour Paris. You know, I want to step out down the Champs-Elysees.
From the Arch of Triumph to the Petit Palais, that's for me. Bonjour,
Bonjour Paris. You know, so let's get started. And we were off.
It was directed like a musical.
Liza said, look, it doesn't want to look rehearsed. The more human, the more goofed up, that's going to make this happen.
We're so wild in comparison. We had 12 African-American girls. They only had one.
no sets. It was just straightforward fashion, in your face, and modern.
All of that energy and that joy and that wonder and that curiosity. Well, that is America. At the end of Halston's piece, they threw their programs up in the air. They went bananas.
Versailles put American fashion on the map. On the map.
Halston was at the top of his game. He came like a king of the Americans.
Versailles was an extension of what he felt he could achieve going down the road because of Norton Simon. When he came back, the whole thing changed. His first real office by himself was all lined with mirrors, all along. It was like totally mirrored, very modern and very slick and minimal. You can see his changing of his whole almost psyche. The hair started getting cut, less bohemian, more crisp and clean, opened his face, the white shirt, the tie. He's very in control. He is Halston. He is Halston, you know. And it was like, wow!
I'm Halston, and this is my home. The architect was Paul Rudolph, and the day I saw it, I bought it. It's the only real modern house built in the city of New York since the Second World War. It's like living in a three-dimensional sculpture.
When I was hired by Norton Simon, of course I had to meet Halston. So I went to his townhouse, and he showed me through the whole thing, and he was clearly delighted with his new toy, and I was terribly impressed. And I remember saying to him, I'm going to enjoy making money for you, Halston, because you know how to spend it. My brief was that whatever else you do, you've got to get the fragrance underway. He wanted Elsa to design the bottle.
Elsa Peretti would come in. He wanted it to be sort of a teardrop shape, like her iconic necklaces. And they went through a number of iterations.
I designed not thinking about the deadline. You know how much time it takes me to do this glass? No. From 74 up to now, and it's still not good.
No one had ever seen a bottle like that. It had a curved neck. Max Factor people hated it.
Production people at Max Factor called me and said, you know what this nut is doing now? He's putting out a bottle that looks like a glob. You can't fill it from the top. It won't work.
They had to get a special stopper. They were talking about the economics of it.
I don't think Halston really cared what they thought.
It is my name attached to it, so I want to live with this for a long time. Just the bottle alone is a revolutionary new concept.
Then I got another phone call. It said, you also realize what he's doing? He's not even putting his name on it.
Because he thought it was a work of art. And simplicity was the keynote. So his name was on the ribbon with which the bottle itself was tied. No one else had done it that way before. And then the fragrance caught on. It became a seller. Largest American designer fragrance. The stores couldn't get it fast enough.
It was ballistic. You get into a taxi in New York, and the taxi driver would say, oh, you smell good, you're wearing Halston. Once it started to go, everything started to go.
I began a very large license program. We were the first American designer to really do this heavy.
Then I have 2 fragrances for men, for tie licensee, for suede sport jackets. We have an entire cosmetic line. My name is Halston. I'm Halston.
You've got luggage, you've got...
rugs, sheets, perfume, cosmetics.
Really?
Shoes, bags, gloves, sunglasses, all kinds of things.
Holy cow, you wouldn't have 20 till payday, would you? I'm a little short.
He designed a uniform for the '76 Olympics.
He designed the new Girl Scout uniform for leaders, so we don't have to wear the drab-looking things we used to.
Thank you very much, you know.
And you also dress the Avis?
Well, or the whole Avis company. And, I do a lot of things.
When do you sleep?
Oh, well, I sleep.
I would call that the golden years. What he touched turned to gold. He set up the deal for Elsa to go with Tiffany.
Halston took me there, and there I was, with Tiffany.
That's all, please. He made the wedding clothes for Sly and the Family Stone.
He designed all the costumes for Martha Graham and then supported the company.
He had a lot of things on his plate. And I have a feeling that is where some of the tension started to happen.
Halston felt that he individually had to design everything that was licensed, and it was a monumental task.
I must be a part of it. I've never, ever just lent my name for a commercial business venture.
From the first day I got there, one of the things that I did every couple of weeks was go to the bank and take out a ton of cash and bring it back in an envelope. They'd say, I might be in a meeting, but if Mr. Fisher comes, just give him the envelope. I never saw him snort cocaine, but I paid. I mean, I got a lot of money every few weeks, $2,000 to $3,000.
I want to stop all the kind of bullshit that we are drug addicts. We smoke, yeah, but we work. For that, our things were going. For that, Halston thing. What do you think? We Halston, we were there and smoking? No. We're always thinking what you wear, what you do, all night long. I was working all night long. Yeah, we took drugs, of course. How you cannot take drugs being up all night long? But he was smoking. It was not heavy drugs. A little coke sometimes.
Halston took me into his office one day and he just said, you know, I want somebody who's completely committed to the business.
I went to work for Halston. Best thing I ever did. I was totally 1,000% devoted to him. I remember going in to set up my office. It started to rain. And when I got off the elevator, Halston was standing there. He looked at me and he said, "You're all wet." He was carrying a red raincoat and he said, "I want you to try this on. I made this for Liza, but I want you to have it." He was such a hard worker. I mean, he'd come in early, go home late, and always accomplish something. Until Studio 54.
I took Halston to Studio 54. You couldn't get that guy out of the goddamn den. He fell in love with it right away.
I took Halston to Studio 54, so I didn't know what other stories you heard, but I remember that was the first time he says, "I'm going to bring friends."
Halston gave a birthday party for Bianca Jagger, and Bianca got on the horse, and that photograph went around the world. And that made 54 like the place where everybody went.
You're a devotee of Studio 54. What do you see there? As Truman said, it's the only democracy. It's good for everybody on every level of society.
This is the scene outside a New York disco called Studio 54. This is the place that's in with the disco crowd, except that these people are still out. Of course, Liza Minnelli and her kind of celebrities sweep right through the protective ranks of doorkeepers.
They are discriminating at Studio 54. Recently, a president of a Wall Street brokerage firm was ejected, and he was a member, so he's suing for $1 million.
I'll do a Donna Summer song.
I think they lived out a lot of their fantasies as gay boys. Hollywood was such a big influence on both Andy and Halston.
I was born in the Midwest, and, you know, much of your life was really probably involved in going to the movies on Saturdays and Sundays.
If you were at a dinner party and you could have one person on the left and one on the right, who would that be?
Halston and Elizabeth Taylor.
Why?
Oh, they're both wonderful.
They were in society, but they became a new kind of society. Suddenly, you know, gays were part of society. Many more Jews were part of society.
He wasn't a snob. Halston wasn't a snob. He wasn't uppity. He wasn't anything.
Both you and Halston come from Indiana. You sound like Cary Grant. You sound like Noel Coward. When did you lose the accent? Were you unhappy at some point with where you came from and decided, I'm going to show them?
Never. Never. I wasn't, anyway.
Well, everybody was free love and free this and poppers and coke and this and that. It got very muddy, and it's like quicksand. If everybody around you is going down, you're gonna go too.
Victor was a destructive force. Andy did Victor's portraits. I think he did too. And one day Victor shows up with the paintings completely covered with graffiti and just, you know, a mess. And he had painted over them, thinking this was like taking Andy's art to another level. And Andy was really mad. And Andy was like, don't think I'm doing new ones, Victor.
When did everything start to go bad? You said the Studio 54 opened that year.
Oh, no, it's like, get all that shit up. You know when it all started to go bad? When we moved to that goddamn Olympic Tower.
Company was booming, so I went out looking for space. And I came upon this thing in Olympic Tower, and that was the end of the search, because Halston, that's the one we're going to get. The architect came up with some plans, and Halston didn't like them. He wanted something that took spectacular use of the space. And he began to design what he wanted. Mirrors everywhere. The walls were mirrors. Everything was mirrors. Except my office. I wouldn't allow them to put up mirrors in my office. I didn't want to look at myself all day.
Halston made sure that his entire workroom were in a room with a lot of windows, so that as they sewed and fitted every day, they didn't feel confined. That really impressed me.
When the workmen saw the space, the women wept.
That was the best workroom in the world. It was even too good to be a workroom.
There wasn't at the time, I don't think there is today, a fashion house ever as grand as that was.
In that space, he had reached something very specific to him. That's where he felt he belonged.
The shows there were amazing. You felt like walking on a cloud down the runway.
Once he moved into the Olympic Tower, his front row was the most glamorous in New York. Diana Vreeland, Lee Radziwill, Liza Minnelli.
He was the first to really bring in movie stars.
They are the elite of New York City, and they've been invited by Halston, who's standing here beside me.
I always saw him as famous.
I made it in New York.
But then, of course, it became ginormous.
I mean, what he did was he surrounded himself for public appearances with what became known as the Halstonettes.
Brilliant marketing. Brilliant.
Sometimes there were 20 of us. You know?
Some of the people I knew in the fashion business, I mean, they were totally dismissive. I mean, who does he think he is? And the answer is, what picture is going to run? Is it going to be some fashion designer standing by himself, or is it going to be Halston with the Halstonettes?
I want to run the faces of all the women close up. Right. We've done that. Okay, where is
John Fairchild is the publisher of Women's Wear. As always, he has the final word on how last night's party will look in the next edition. Women's Wear is the Bible of the industry.
Halston, if they stand on the table, would it hurt the table?
It would, because I just had them lacquered.
No. But can they stand on the table with their bare feet?
Whatever makes you happy. Assistance.
Yes. Boy, what a shot that is. Ooh. Leave the candle.
We knew how to get publicity, you know what I mean? The problem was he began to believe it all. I mean, in order to get a interview with this guy, it was like trying to get to Pope John because he was next to that fucking cross.
Everybody up in Limit Tower called him H. And they'd say H, and he'd say, I am the emperor. And he was believing this stuff.
Halston, is it tougher to get on top or to stay on top?
Halston said, I'm going to tell you, we're going to China. I'm like, wow.
China wanted to show the world that they were opening up. So they invited the master of publicity to visit the Silk Cities.
Come on, Dee Dee. Come on, everybody. What I want to explain to you all is what we're doing.
With the China trip, you could see the brain working. Each girl had their own personal collection designed, everything all laid out.
We just needed to pack our lingerie and makeup.
We will also go to the Ming Tombs, and we'll go to the Forbidden City, and one of the best places is going to be, of course, the Great Wall of China.
Every affair, you know, dinner here, dinner there, everything was choreographed. It was just incredible.
If it's a cold day, she'll wear, you know, sort of a shawl like this, but this is a China Tech silk.
He just had total control.
Hi, Andy. Hi. Come on in and get photographed, Andy.
He asked me one day, do you dream of what you're doing? And obviously I was exhausted from going to Studio 54 and all those parties. I was like, no, I haven't dreamt of it. He's like, you know, Naeem, it'll be amazing. You'll be a great designer when you start dreaming. It should come in you in the night, then you know that you're thinking about it.
Naeem, why don't you show Andy, put the lights on, make him sparkle over there, huh? Those are your things.
So to him, night and day, it was there.
You see, this is only part of it. We've got another about 15 people, because all...
There must have been about 30 people, and I was coordinating it. There was 100 pieces of Hartman luggage.
We were going to China. Who got invited to China?
I said to the Chinese executive, we're coming with a lot of luggage. You have a way of handling this? Oh, yes, yes. And he came with a shopping cart. They had one shopping cart to move our luggage.
This is the beginning of the world tour of fashions by Halston.
I think there's a big change.
Why?
Well, I think it's America's time, really.
Here he is, sort of an ambassador of American fashion. He became somewhat like a world figure.
Mr. Halston visits and your show will contribute greatly to the enhancement of the friendly relations between China and...
我和我的同事
But we were basically there to go to the silk factories.
Those people who had done the fabrics actually got to see how you could play with the fabric. So they were just like in awe. It was wonderful. I was in awe of them being in awe of us.
It might be a little tight, I think, but I consider it a great compliment that she wanted to put it on.
Halston was saying, no, they want to modernize. They want to modernize here.
Is it that complicated to change the patterns?
I think that made the trip for Halston because I think he thought he could contribute something to the people of China.
There was really PR, and he got tremendous amount of publicity. He was all over. And when you see the pictures, they were beautiful. I mean, they looked fantastic. You know, if you didn't know the backside of the story, it looked like a fantastic trip. Halston of the group here, Halston of the group there, and they all look great. You know, half of them are really miserable, but they all look terrific.
It's exhausting, and I'm just starting. We had a film crew following us the whole time.
Wait a minute, go back.
Every day was directed by Halston.
Get out of the camera way. The cameras are here, so you can't be here. You have to be on the other side.
He just wanted total control. And it was too much. It became too much.
I want you to all stand up there on the runway. Not in twos and twos. You're doing it like a fashion show. It looks so dumb. Go out again. No, not please. Just do it.
He was a perfectionist. He had a very rough time in giving up. It was an emotional, like, lock-in.
No, nothing's lined up. Connie? Can't you people line it up like I've lined it up? I mean, really, look at the boards. It's so dumb. What do you think I did all this for? Well, I hope nobody has to go tonight because we got to go through this.
He was a bit of a bully. You really had to stand up to him, otherwise you'd be lost. And there wasn't a lot of people who could do that. Very, very few people in our company.
He would snap at you. And even though we all had the same amount of abuse, you took it personally. I never, ever got used to being yelled at.
It just became a different relationship and a different company.
Even with Faye, I mean, she defended that man, but he'd just take it all out on her. Scream and yell at the top of his lungs, I mean.
Come on. Come on, Dee Dee. Come on, everybody. Don't walk out like you're parade.
But the aura of it all and being a part of it kept you hooked. You know, eventually, he had all of us wear black at the office. He wanted us to be a backdrop to the clothes, and everything to him was a PR event. We were all PR events. It was the stage set that was us.
What we're looking for is the illusion of art.
I give you a little bit of highlight there. That's very good.
You see, our mistake, including Halston, is to take our name too seriously. I mean, for me, I was a jewelry designer. I was a good jewelry designer. I dedicate all my time to it. That's it. And then I want to start to be human being, you know? Which is sad.
What's the difference?
Ah, darling, big difference. Big difference.
Elsa was always in love. I mean, truly in love with Halston. And they were having big problems. Halston was criticizing her stuff and saying she wasn't working.
We had fights because he was so much out of it, you know, because I'm vulgar, not vulgar, but, you know, I cannot with Stefan all the time think that the pencil has to be like that. Impossible.
Everybody's got to do their own thing, and I suddenly lost my identity. As Elsa was losing her identity, she had to throw in the sable. I had to throw in the towel.
He became a real loner.
That looks nice with the reflection.
And did you see the Elizabeth cover?
Oh,
That's beautiful.
Isn't that wonderful?
I love it
She
for her.
looks
She looks really great.
I love the picture of her inside.
Can you
Yeah.
keep that up there? Can you turn it a little more towards me?
Right.
Okay, right there. Good.
Okay.
Oh, it looks great.
You like that?
Mm-hmm. I love it.
Yeah, I think Elizabeth will like that.
Color is fabulous.
Yeah, it's
Fabric
beautiful.
looks good.
Yeah. With a cover of Harper's Bazaar, I just love it on her.
And the truth of the matter is that his business was slowing down. He peaked, and other names were showing up.
Which brings us to Calvin's and the survival of the fittest.
Calvin Klein, I presume. That's your name?
Harry Ellis is a new name in fashion.
But Halston was never one to fall behind.
I am pleased to announce an association between Halston Enterprises and J.C. Penney. Today, we have signed $1 billion retail sales agreement.
It was a license over 5 years. It was the largest designer deal that had ever been made. Enough money to make anyone, even Norton Simon, sit up and take notice.
I begged him not to do the Penny thing. This is going to kill us. And he kept saying, no, 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 no. I want to dress everybody in America.
It sounded like a good deal to me to create things for people who couldn't afford his. Yes.
Well, you know, strangely enough, when I was a kid, I always shopped at Penny's. My mother always took me to Penny's to buy all the clothes that we wore to school and everything else. And it's true, I come from Des Moines, Iowa, and my mother, being practical Midwestern lady, always took us there.
In one highly publicized stroke of the pen, Halston moved from class to mass. The reaction of the fashion world ranged from shock to outrage.
J.C. Penney? Yes, J.C. Penney, that nationwide middle-class retailer that offers clothes right off the rack, has landed a very big designer. Would you expect to find a designer like Halston in here?
No, not Halston and J.C. Penney.
Obviously, we're very excited about it. We think it is a catch.
J.C. Penney is trying to trade up, but they're not quite going to change their name to J.C. Penier or J.C. Penoir.
I believe in our country, and I like America, and I like Americans to look good, and I'm an American designer, and I love the opportunity to do it.
It's a first between a department store chain and a major designer, with the clothes expected to be on the racks in the fall of '83.
That makes a very good mix for both catalog and retail.
Now, this is called Halston 3.
It's called Halston 3. Well, it's really the third stage of my career. The first being in the millinery business, and then in fancy clothes and dressing all the stars and things, and now a larger public dressing America, really.
He said he would design it. He designed it. And everybody, of course, wanted a piece of it. You know, the guy who made scarves wanted Halston scarves. The guy who made shoes wanted Halston shoes. All that was going on.
J.C. Penney is an organization that is so vast. It's not like one person oversees the whole thing. And so talk about cultures, different cultures, completely.
We asked Penny executives to sum up the Halston 3 line in one word.
Profit.
Volume.
It's what America wants.
Things became so tense that Norton Simon brought in consultants to fix the relationship.
When I got involved in it and everything, I thought, oh boy, we're really in for it, Billy. I mean, shit, this is a mother lode. These people really need help. Some sketches they couldn't read. Fabrics they didn't know anything about. Everybody would pat me on the head and say, oh, listen, just leave it to us. We'll work it out. You just be artistical. Well, no way. The only way it'll work, let me tell you, listen to Daddy. The only way it'll work is to make the goddamn dress, which we're making the goddamn dress, and then they're gonna look at the goddamn dress, they'll see the point of difference. I'm just trying to make it work.
I know that. It was
Desperately.
Over Players, he's got to understand that we got to commit like 8 months in advance. We need to get the approvals and the go-aheads and the concepts, but he's so involved with everything that everything on the label. The label took him months.
America has heard about it, and we've all dreamt about it. And now, after months of anticipation, it's here. The Halston 3 collection for 1983.
This is an experiment, you know, and it could succeed, it could not succeed.
Quite a show. 500 of the fashionables sat in a huge room dominated by a 60-foot whale hanging down from the ceiling. People didn't know whether to cry bravo or there she blows.
This has been probably the most challenging and gratifying fashion exercise in my career.
He did really give a lot to it. I mean, he was really taking it seriously. He did a really well-conceived line.
Gosh, we had about 26 models in there. Clothes looked spectacular. It was perfect for that audience. And everybody looked fabulous, very good reviews. And the show was very successful, very.
I'm telling him how great his show was, and I knew he was behind it.
The board of directors wanting to go out and buy it right away. That's great.
Well, we'll have a lot more great showings.
Yeah, you know, I think
it's the
so.
first of many to come.
No, I'm very proud of it. It's wonderful, wonderful thing.
They had a big flag out at the museum when they had the show. And Ira Niemark, who is the president of Bergdorf Goodman, and Jackie, his wife, were coming home from dinner, and they saw this Halston flag. He called his senior merchandising manager that night at home, and she called me at home and said he wants everything out of the store, the fragrance, the ready-to-wear, everything. He doesn't want anything to do with Halston.
Didn't you run into some trouble with Bergdorf, who was the first place you had
not at all. No, I don't think so. You know, Bergdorf, you know, I wish them well. I started my career at Bergdorf and helped to make Bergdorf famous. But Bergdorf is a rather small account compared to all America.
He was very upset. He didn't understand it. Also shocked over the fact that could happen that quickly.
Did Bergdorf Goodman drop your line because you went to Penny's?
They, I think, felt threatened, but I think there's a way out of it.
Your connection to Bergdorf is a very important
I helped
wasn't it
to
the
make
first to
Bergdorf.
give you?
He stepped out of the norm, and people like their boundaries that are set between them and those.
The fancy schmancy guys are saying that undermines your elegant, chic,
It
hoi
doesn't at all.
polloi, huh?
My business is very good. You know, if one store more or less doesn't like it, I mean, you know, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but you
I try
can't-
my best.
But it's not.
And then I started getting all kinds of calls from presidents of the stores all over the United States and merchandising managers and cutting back on orders. That was pure hell after that. He realized that he had done the wrong thing.
You know, the press could be mean. They were not supporting him. It seemed odd to me. It just seemed like a gang. One person misbehaves, and then everybody's bullying this one person.
Clearly, the purpose was to strengthen Penny's position as a supplier of fashionable merchandise.
Okay, fine. That's a diplomatic answer.
I guess you got what you need.
Oh,
You can cut out
absolutely.
and chop away and do what you need. Okay.
But the J.C. Penney thing became so enormous a problem that the distance between us became too great. He wanted me to leave, but he didn't want to say he wanted me to leave. He wanted to make things so unpleasant that I would leave. I pushed him too hard. I pushed too many licenses down on him.
Things got out of control, and I start not to feel well. So I went to the doctor, and he said, "You have the beginning of an ulcer." And it was from the stress. I just got to the point where I couldn't deal with it and had to leave. I hated to leave. I loved Halston, but I had to get out.
I saw him frustrated and like, how could this thing come into my life? And I said, well, maybe you have to drop the whole thing and come with me and get out of here. We'll just get a boat, you'll take a break. And he'd say, I can't go.
They say that when it rains, it pours. Well, a perfect storm was about to happen when his good friend David Mahoney threw him into the belly of the whale.
The day before the J.C. Penney show, David made an offer to buy Norton Simon. He was going to take it private, and he could make an awful lot of money doing that.
Takeover mania in America. Huge corporations are gobbling one another at a rate unmatched in history.
But S-Mark came along out of the blue. They made an outside bid that was better than David's and won the battle.
I don't know how Halston felt because after Norton Simon sold him, David Mahoney was, not there.
You cannot expect other people to be interested in your welfare all the time. It's unfair and it's illogical. So therefore, you better take care of your own instincts and your own efforts.
Dog eat dog, look out for yourself, or is that what you mean?
Well, no, I really don't mean that, although that's part of it, Jane.
You know how business is. You know how money is. You know how that is. It's the pollution in the air.
S-Mark wasn't really in the fashion business. Except for maybe...
Feeling smashing or the height of fashion? Playtex once and you'll playtex for keeps. For a comfort that proves you...
So, Halston was put under Joel Smilo, one of America's toughest bosses, according to Fortune magazine.
This is a little teeny company, sort of a fly speck. And so, think of it, supposing you own the New York Yankees, and you also owned a Class D farms team in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. How much time would you spend with your Bethlehem, Pennsylvania farm team?
In 1983, my uncle asked me to come to dinner while I was here. I had recently graduated from college. I was very green. And he dropped the bomb on me. He said, well, would you like to work for me? And I just sort of did a somersault and said, okay, I would love to work for you. When do I start? I think maybe he wanted to bring in a family member who he could trust 100%. There was a new manager there from S-Mark who had just come on. Do I have to say his name?
You want to see his name?
No.
My first day at Halston was interesting. I'd never seen anything quite like it. Here I'm the kid from Brooklyn, right? That goes into this world of Halston's castle, Olympic Tower.
I'm on television.
There was a kind of a pinky throw everywhere you went. Halston was a little bit Hollywood in my parlance, but I thought we hit it off.
You'd never think Carl ever be with Halston. I mean, physically, mentally, anything. But when Carl came in a very strange way, Halston liked him a lot.
He kept saying, I've never had the right kind of management, and that's part of our problem. And he gives me a kiss on the forehead. It was wonderful. And then he says, you're now the king. And he made with his own hands the crown that he gave me.
Halston, I think, honestly believed that Carl Epstein was going to mediate with big business. But I remember thinking to myself, well, there are two men in this room, but there's only one king at Halston Enterprises.
Je suis le roi. Voilà. I thought, hey, this is fun. Clothes had to be made for me, similar to what he wears. Oh, my wife, my kids are getting all his clothes. And then one day, he introduces me to Liza Minnelli. I said, you know, this is the hell with your business. This is great. You know, this is a way to live.
We had budget meetings, and apparently theirs was a disaster. Carl was not doing what we agreed to. I'm at the top, and I don't care what's happening in the engine room. I know the engine isn't running. And it wasn't. Turn this into a brand, turn this into something we can handle, and stop having it be this airy-fairy kind of I work when I want to, I'm not inspired, I'm an artist kind of thing.
I read all the personnel files, and I had my rude awakening. D.D. Ryan, I have to laugh. Halston said, well, she's the resident geisha. Bill Dugan was another one. He said, well, he amuses me. And then he had Victor Hugo. I'll never forget once he called me, frantic. Victor Hugo was going to kill him.
Victor held the entire office captive for several hours. He was kind of like a mad dog.
Well, it was shocking to Carl because I don't think Carl was in the habit of taking drugs, period, you know, except, you know, Pepto-Bismol.
I just decided to duck out and go to the top of the Sixes and have some gin and tonics.
It was crazy Never Land. Then I checked all the expense stuff, and that blew my mind. The flowers.
Carl had me in to talk to me about what was being spent on the flower budget. And I said, yes, I know what's being spent on the flower budget, Carl. I'm, you know, writing up the bills myself.
S. Mark believed you could have plastic plants instead of orchid plants. They're plants.
Entertainment was enormous. The kitchen cost. Example, they would prepare a meal for him while he's in Montauk and put it on a private plane, fly it to Montauk, and deliver it to Halston's house. And that was a company expense. That meal must have cost $2,000.
It was the 80s.
Martha Graham was honored in Paris last night. She was presented with the Cross of the Chevalier of the Legion of Honor.
The honeymoon ended when he was going to go to Paris with Martha Graham. He's going to take his staff with him. We calculated the cost of doing that. And just the workroom was $125,000. So I then told Halston, you can't do it. Halston was so incensed. How dare you say no to me? It was like Jekyll and Hyde. Suddenly Mr. Hyde came out. From that on, I was the enemy.
Carl every morning would put little sticky notes on Halston's table about what had to happen today or what things were going to be taken away, and he didn't like it.
We need to do this, we need to do that. And it was just like, you're bossing him around? Like, no one does that.
It was a big struggle, and it got worse and worse, and he started coming in later and later so he wouldn't have to deal with seeing those people.
Be careful, it's a little dark here. Hold on. History is filled with wars, but you have to understand the difference between strategy and tactics. Strategy is the art of war. Tactics is the art of battle. The only real battle you must never lose is the last one.
There was rumor that a junior designer was coming in to help with the JCPenney and just huge workload.
In the middle of February, this picked up the phone and this very deep voice said, "John Ridge, this is Halston." And he said, "Can you come see me?" So of course I did. And it turned out that it wasn't really an interview. It was, when can you start? And I think he just needed to know there was one head, two arms, and that I knew who Charles James was.
John Ridge, he was a costume designer. That was his field, like. He was really high cultural design. We knew our way. We do for so many years. We do so good. We went so high. Now we need him to tell us what to do.
Probably after a month, I went to Carl and said, "I'm leaving. This is just an impossible situation." We were there until 8, 9. We never knew when we were leaving. I can't be responsible for what the workroom cost. And Carl said to me, "Don't leave. Things are going to change."
There was something called the Werner Report, but it was so hush-hush, I didn't see it until probably 7 or 8 months after I was there. When I read it, it dawned on me that everything was tactical. They were going to solve their problem by how we train the staff, how we make the staff unafraid of Halston, how they would learn to cope with Halston and his tirades. Mahoney's attitude was, we're not going to try to control Halston. My strategy was going back to square one. Sometimes the kindest thing in the world you can do is to say no to somebody. He started coming in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and he wants the work group to wait for him to come in at that time. I told him it's not going to happen. They're going to leave at 5 o'clock, period. Done. Over. In the final analysis, he is like me and everybody else in that place, an employee.
Carl was answerable. And, it's all about the bottom line.
I suppose he was there to just slowly push Halston out. They had the brand. Halston was the diva designer that they didn't necessarily need anymore. Halston started seeking legal counsel.
When I first met him, he was quite distraught. He was so frustrated and so angry, he had trouble completing sentences and thoughts. Suddenly, he was cast adrift. Well, I guess I can best put it the way Halston put it, that the folks from Planet Tampon landed on Planet Halston.
I saw him tired at times. I thought he was really tired.
One time I came in, and I think he might have had a panic session. He just seemed very stressed, and I said, "Can I do anything?" He said, "No, just sit here. Just sit here." And we sat there for like 30 minutes. Wow, that's new.
Halston never asked me what I thought of his collection. This time, he asked me what I thought of his collection. And honestly, it was like someone had punched me in my stomach. because I knew that he was feeling not as strong as he had been, and it made me sad.
If you lived in another epoch, in another time, in another city, could you pick it for me?
Oh, no way. I like right now, and tomorrow's going to be better, and next week is going to be better. No, no, no. I'm the all-time optimist. No, I like it right now.
The problem was simply drugs. He had gone way too far.
I don't do tuxedos.
He was out of control. Out of control was symmetrical with Esmar taking over. So you tell me which is the chicken and which is the egg.
Sometime in that spring, Liza went to Betty Ford, and Halston said, it's great that things like this exist for those who need them. Of course, the rest of us have to get on and earn a living.
Very hard to do an interview about your best friend, especially if what's popular in that day and age is digging a little. I don't like it. I hated it when they did it to my mother, or my father, or myself. And I won't do it to Halston. I just won't. I refuse.
In June, he had summer to do for JCPenney, which was way late at that point.
I was gonna cool off. I don't want to do JCPenney anymore. I don't know why, but that's when everything went upside down.
I think he thought that if he went on strike and didn't design the collections, that he had some power of the situation, you know.
I'm getting calls from JCPenney saying, where are our products? Where are the designs? He hasn't approved them. And whether he was doing that to get revenge on Carl, or whether he was doing it because he was doped up, it wasn't happening.
They were very frustrated because they couldn't get sketches from Halston. So one day I drew them a jacket because they had to have a jacket, and Halston wasn't there. And he was not too happy that I'd given them a sketch. But Penny's was very happy about it. And I think that they went away viewing me as a source that they could turn to and get something. And that was kind of the beginning of my really personal relationship with Penny's.
It is inappropriate to have John Ridge involved in areas which do not fall under his responsibilities. Signed, Halston. To John Ridge from Carl Epstein. Please keep up the good work.
Carl was hell-bent on isolating Halston. Halston felt that he could no longer work with Carl. All he was good at was destroying. We decided the best thing for Halston would be to go to Montauk and give everybody a chance to take a deep breath. We thought that there would be a deep breath taken also on the part of the Esmark people. Turned out not to be the case.
Carl started cleaning house. Dee Dee Ryan, Bill Dugan. I was fired.
May I have your attention, please?
They couldn't touch me because he still had an office there, and I was still his secretary. I remember him calling me.
Carl held a meeting in front of all the employees at Halston Enterprises. He said that it would no longer be a one-man show. John David Ridge was promoted and would be in charge of the design.
He is livid. It's my name on the label. How dare you?
It was his company, his people, his workers, everything. So we went back and it unraveled into a very unpleasant scenario.
It was like having two chefs in the kitchen. Everybody was saying, well, let's divide the space up there. And this half is Halston, and this other half is Halston 3 with John Ridge.
At some point, I said no. You can get someone else to do it, but I'm not going to. At this point, I knew Halston pretty well, the man.
There was a lot of angst going on. And so I had my first meeting with Roy. Yes, Bregman, what can I do for you? And I'd say, well, Roy, that was the beginning. He was talking about going into another business. That's why I started calling him Roy. I said, you don't own your name, pal. Read the small print. We own your name.
This was all blowing up. They said to me, I want you to go in and talk to him. I was there that morning till we were sitting, he and I, in his office till about 1:30 in the morning. And he said to me, we can do this. I said, we can do what? He said, we can take this over and get it away from the corporation and run it as an I said, Halston, it would never work. Where's this money gonna come from? I said, do you know how much money you spend? And how luxurious? I said, just take a look around. You've had the biggest and the best. And this kind of money is not gonna be found again.
They requested, and I put that in quotation marks, that I not be present at the meeting. I'm sitting in my office, and I felt like having a cup of tea. So I thought I'd go into the kitchen. I go to the door, put my key in the lock. The key is not working. I couldn't understand why isn't the key working? So I run around to the front door, and there's a guy working on the door there, a locksmith. He's changing the locks. I said, who hired you?
Mr. Halston?
I stormed into that meeting, and I just blew my top. Even his lawyer was shocked.
No, Halston didn't change the locks. He was locked out. Carl admitted he changed the locks.
Job is done, Mr. Epstein.
You actually admitted it.
I admitted it?
In Women's Wear Daily. Several months later, when there was a story about trouble at Olympic Tower.
I said, look, that's it, I've had it. I don't want to have to think about somebody changing the locks. Either he goes or I go.
When Epstein gave him the signal, they said, we're done, you're done. And Halston was out.
It was weird. It was surreal that this coup d'etat happened so quickly.
I was very heartbroken for him. He was like a man without a country. The Halston name, that was the most important thing in his entire life, could be used by that corporation without his consent.
Halston Enterprises and organization mean a symbolic signing of the licensing agreement for Mexico.
Es gente que sabe elegir. Viste Halston.
Hola.
Week after week, month after month, he realized that he didn't have much clout anymore with the company.
When one comes in to make a company healthy, it depends how you define health.
People were suddenly at peace, had comfortable jobs, were not being shouted at.
We had not much to do. No movie star, no celebrity, Jesse Penny. And that's it. And not even because at one point they used to do everything in China. We used to send the pattern, and they used to make everything there.
Carl told me one day that he was going to sell off all these samples.
That was his record that should be in a museum. And they decided to sell those important pieces for $25, $50 a piece.
But it was just stuff sitting there year after year. doing nothing.
Some pieces went here, some pieces went there, but the mother lode of it is gone. Eliminated, erased. It was hostile.
There was nothing personal about it. If you want to call something personal, I really didn't give a damn what Halston's reaction would be. We were beyond that.
Why not give it to a museum?
And then there was a bookcase full of videotapes of the shows. So to Carl, well, I want these tapes. He said, no, Halston has copies.
How do you do? I'm Halston.
Carl said he was going to erase them and sell the blanks to the next tenant.
Everyone thinks you're an overnight success. I've worked very hard for 20 years. This is... There is no home in Iowa, you see.
I really wanted to show this photo. So my grandparents, this is Hallie Mae and James Edward. They were working class. My grandmother, I'm not sure, made it past 9th grade. They had 4 children. My father first, and then Roy Halston Froelich came along in 1932. You know, times were tough. Grew up in the Depression era. Halston and my father weren't close with their father. They loved him, but he had a temper. My grandmother took him under her wing and was sort of protecting him. She was a sweet, sweet, soft-spoken, very mellow woman, and you just felt so calm around her. When she passed away, Halston was in the middle of JCPenney, but he didn't tell them anything. He just said he had to leave. He suffered silently. Halston wasn't estranged from his family per se. It's just that the family's very conservative. He felt that they wouldn't understand his lifestyle with Victor there, and although he was constantly trying to get him out of his life, and I was there, and eventually he did. I kept trying to tell him to reconnect with the siblings, telling him they're not going to judge you, the family's there for you. And at a certain point, I helped him organize the first family reunion in Montauk. He let his hair down and was the brother that he was 40 years prior. But he was who he was, so we had to plan it, every moment of it. I got all white sweatsuits for one event, and I got all Army uniforms for the safari.
He loved life, and you could tell that about him. You could tell.
I think he just wanted maybe to slow down a little. Being a regular person. He was here, he was Halston, but I think inside he was, you know, Roy.
It came to a point where he said, I'm not going to be able to go back to designing, so you need to kind of pursue your own life. You know, he didn't want to hold me back, so I decided to move to California. It was a difficult decision to make, but I bought a car and told him I wanted to take him for a drive up the Hudson River to blow off the stink. was a beautiful, sunny Sunday, and at a certain point through the chatter, he said, well, I have to tell you something. And he revealed to me at that point that he was sick with HIV. And I just shut down and started freaking out. And he said, it's not a death sentence. So I did the stiff upper lip thing, because he didn't like people to cry, and just went along with it like, no, it's not a death sentence, no. But you have to remember, so many people were getting sick in those days.
The fashion industry here is being devastated by AIDS. When Perry Ellis died in 1986, his company denied it was AIDS-related.
There is no drug, there is no treatment, there is no vaccine, there is no prevention, there is no cure.
No one was beating it. I was terrified. I was scared for him.
I didn't want to leave. I kept asking him, and even the last day I said, I can stay here. I can live here, I can be your nurse, I can take you, I can get your stuff if you don't want to go out. And he's like, no, I don't want you to do that. So I left.
He handled it the way he had to handle it. You know, denial, and then fighting it and saying, no, this is not going to take me, and then finally realizing it had. He decided to sell the house.
He decided he was going to live his last moments of his life with his family in California. He didn't want anybody to know, so I didn't tell anybody until I had to tell my dad.
He left, and he completely hid away and didn't want anybody to see him.
We would write him letters.
I did not know that he was ill. I wish I could call him now.
That was a period of people I knew that they will never come back. But I remember them. I don't regret those times. I am alone, though. And you are a voyeur.
I tried to find out what was going on, and then I heard the stories that he was in California driving along the coast in a convertible Rolls Royce, enjoying his life with his sunglasses and his hands up, enjoying the breeze. That's how I see him.
He used to say, we lived in an enchanted forest because we lived across the street from this woods. It was poor Depression time, but everything was so easy and comfortable and serene.
He passed away the night of the Academy Awards, actually. His name was up on the television screen. We had a beautiful ceremony, and we played Fanfare for a Common Man. Halston was a common man. He came from nowhere. At the end, he said, I just want to fade away. But as somebody like him, he couldn't just fade away.
The death of a great American designer. His name was Halston. He was only 57 when he died in California. Yesterday, he died as the result of AIDS.
With AIDS, the cause, AIDS-related cancer.
We profoundly hope that it has a positive impact on the public and becoming increasingly aware of this terrible problem and doing something about it.
Five months later, Halston Enterprises closed its Olympic Tower headquarters. Today, fashion is fast, and high up above the streets, in his beloved Olympic Tower, a private investment firm. It's morning again in America.
Does it look pretty much the same? Success fun. Oh, sure, it's fun and it's not fun and it's upbeat and downbeat and everything else, you know. But as my mother says, it's the price you have to pay. Thank you. Okay, it's a wrap.
Takes you by surprise. It comes, leaves all you need and more beside. I am for a life and time by numbers, blessed in fast and low.